You have something I need, a bag of grain, enough to feed your family for a week, and I have something you might want. 3 fish, caught this morning, still fresh. We look at each other. How many fish is a bag of grain worth? 2? 5? What if you don't want fish at all? What if you need wood, and the man with the wood needs cloth, and the woman with the cloth needs grain, and nobody's needs line up perfectly? This is the problem that every human civilization on Earth eventually hit, and every single one of them solved it the same way, independently, without talking to each other, across oceans, across centuries, across cultures that had absolutely nothing in common. They all invented money. That's not a coincidence. That's a signal about something deep in human nature. Economists call it the double coincidence of wants. It sounds academic, but it's actually just a description of a very human frustration. For barter to work, you need 2 people who each have exactly what the other needs, at exactly the same time, in roughly equal value. In a small village of 20 people, this is annoying but manageable. In a town of 2,000, it becomes impossible. You spend more time negotiating trades than actually producing anything. The system collapses under its own weight. And here's what's remarkable. Archaeologists don't find evidence of large-scale barter economies anywhere in the historical record. The idea that humans bartered before money is actually a myth, a story economists told for 200 years that anthropologists have now thoroughly dismantled. What they find instead is something far more interesting. They find the moment money was born, over and over again, in places that never knew each other existed. In the ruins of ancient Ur, archaeologists found clay tablets, thousands of them, and inscribed on those tablets were records, debts, promises. A farmer owes the temple 16 measures of barley to be delivered after harvest. A merchant received wool and will return silver of equal weight within 60 days. This is the earliest written financial system ever discovered. And it didn't start with coins. It started with trust. The temple became the first bank. Grain became the first currency. Not because grain was convenient, because everyone needed it, because its value was understood without negotiation, because for the first time, a farmer could give something today and receive something else entirely 6 months from now. Whoever built this system understood something profound. Value doesn't have to be physical. It just has to be believed. On the other side of the world, the Zhou dynasty was doing something strange. Metalworkers were casting tiny bronze replicas of tools, miniature spades, miniature knives, too small to use, too carefully made to be toys. These were the world's first coins, and the reason they were shaped like tools is the reason they worked. Tools already had agreed upon value in Chinese society. Everyone knew what a spade was worth. So when you cast a spade out of bronze and made it small enough to carry in your pocket, you weren't creating value. You were storing it, compressing it, making it portable. By 600 BC, China had standardized round coins with square holes so they could be strung together and counted easily. An entire financial infrastructure built from a simple question: how do we carry value with us wherever we go? Thousands of miles away, in the trading networks of West Africa, a small spiral shell was changing everything. The cowrie, tiny, smooth, almost beautiful, collected from the Maldive Islands in the Indian Ocean and traded across an entire continent. By the time Arab traders arrived in the 800s AD, they found economies already running on cowrie shells with a sophistication that stunned them. Standardized values, exchange rates between regions, merchants who could calculate complex transactions in their heads using shell denominations they'd memorized since childhood. The cowrie worked for the same reason every currency in history has worked. Not because of what it was, because of what people agreed it meant. Now, step back. Mesopotamia, China, West Africa, the Aztec Empire, which used cacao beans, ancient Greece, which used iron spits called oboloi before silver coins, the Iroquois Confederacy, which used wampum beads. None of these civilizations talked to each other when they invented their systems. Some were separated by thousands of years, and yet the pattern is identical every single time. First, societies grow large enough that barter breaks down. Then one commodity emerges that everyone values. Then that commodity becomes standardized. Then the standardization becomes symbolic. Then the symbol becomes more powerful than the thing it represented. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because money solved the problem of exchange so elegantly, it created a new problem nobody anticipated. If value can be stored, it can be accumulated. And if it can be accumulated, some people will accumulate more than others. And once that happens, the accumulation itself becomes the point. The Mesopotamian temple priests who invented grain accounting didn't intend to invent inequality. The Chinese metalworkers who cast bronze spades didn't intend to create a world where some people would spend their entire lives with none. But intention doesn't matter to systems. Systems follow their own logic. Within a few generations of every monetary invention in history, you find the same thing: debt, landlessness, the gap between those who have and those who owe. The archaeologist David Graeber spent 30 years studying this across dozens of civilizations and found that debt almost always appears before coins. Before money even becomes physical, there are already people who owe more than they can repay. Money is a trap, and we walked into it with our eyes open because the alternative was worse. Today, you carry a rectangle of plastic in your pocket. It contains no gold, no grain, no bronze spade. It is connected to a number in a database that most people at your bank have never seen. That number represents a claim on goods and services that don't yet exist, backed by a government's promise, enforced by systems so complex no single person fully understands them, and you use it without thinking. Every single day, the farmer in ancient Ur pressing a clay tablet to record his debt to the temple. The Zhou dynasty merchant stringing bronze coins on a cord before a long journey. The West African trader counting cowrie shells in the market at dawn. They would recognize exactly what you're doing. Not the technology, the behavior, the trust, the shared belief that this thing, whatever form it takes, means something. Money was never really about grain or shells or gold or numbers on a screen. It was always about one thing: the willingness of strangers to trust each other enough to trade. Every ancient civilization invented money independently because every ancient civilization eventually needed the same thing: not currency, cooperation at scale. And the fact that you can buy a coffee this morning without knowing the farmer who grew the beans, the shipper who moved them, the roaster who prepared them, or the thousands of people who built the infrastructure that delivered them to your cup. That's not modern convenience. That's 5,000 years of strangers learning to trust each other. And it started with a bag of grain and a question nobody could answer: how many fish is this worth?